Hi, I'm Dr. Patty Barch. Welcome to this educational video about emergency use authorization. What I'd like to do is introduce you to what's supposed to happen, what's actually happening, and what's about to happen. So what's supposed to happen? So in a situation where you have something like a global pandemic, there are people in the government, people in authority who are supposed to rally the troops to find a way to treat this disease as fast as possible. So the way they do that is they ask medical doctors and scientists to check drugs that have already gone through the approval process, right? These are drugs that have been approved for other indications, other conditions, and say, hey, try some of the stuff that we already have to see if it works for this condition as well. At the same time, they might look at the pipeline of drugs that have already started the approval process and to see if any of those might be able to be effective for this indication, or they might create new drugs for this indication. But all of those things are supposed to happen. And in many cases, since there are so many drugs, thousands of drugs that have been through the approval process, it's quite likely that there's something out there that will be effective. So and with what's supposed to happen. So if they do an emergency use authorization, so that term means that, oh crap, we don't have anything that we know of yet that will treat this condition, so we will authorize some drugs to be used in the most vulnerable populations until or unless we find a drug that's been approved. Find a drug that's effective. So once they find a drug that's effective, they're supposed to cancel the emergency use authorization, and any of those drugs that were in the pipeline or were newly created are supposed to go back and go through the regular approval process. So that's what's supposed to happen. What actually happened, global worldwide pandemic happens, all of the funding goes to new vaccine development. No task force were formed to evaluate the effectiveness of repurposed drugs. These are, drugs that are still under patent or have already graduated from patent and are generic, to see if any of those would be useful for this condition. That did not happen, and it's supposed to. And so what did happen on the sidelines, you had countless physicians struggling, watching their patients die, who just started trying things with drugs that they had seen to be effective in other indications. They tried them, and lo and behold, they found all these generic drugs that happened to have great success in treating/curing this condition. Now, according to social media rules and guidelines, I cannot name off those drugs for you here and still have an active account. So just know my dad actually was prescribed one of these generic drugs, and within 5 days was nearly fully recovered from the condition. So what did not happen that's supposed to happen is the government did not give any money or form any task force to try to evaluate existing drugs that had been through the safety and efficacy studies, and they just focused exclusively on vaccines, and they were not even the regular vaccines. This is whole new technology of vaccine that's never been used. So it's a double whammy. It's a new technology and a new condition. So now the doctors that discovered that, hey, we have these drugs that work really well, we're curing patients all across the globe with these drug combinations, and they're testifying to Senate committee meetings to tell them they're begging and pleading to please approve and approve these drugs because they've already gone through the process. But if they did that, they'd have to send those vaccines that they spent billions and billions of dollars developing and marketing, they'd have to send those back to the drawing board. They'd actually have to go through the process the way they're supposed to. So they haven't approved these treatments, even though there's worldwide data. Mexico City, Zimbabwe, India, Dr. Pierre Corey out of Wisconsin testified to the Senate committee. Dr. Peter McCullough has been like begging for these things to get approved. Many drugs, at least 4 off the top of my head, and one of them's over the counter. Anyway, so what's happening now is that these vaccines were made against one specific protein within the virus, and that specific protein has changed shape. And so antibodies are like keys and locks, and now the key doesn't fit in the lock anymore. And so you're having quote unquote breakthrough cases, which is basically vaccine failure. Now, that like the amount of breakthrough cases that have been occurring is more than enough to send those things back, like cancel the emergency use authorization. Never mind the fact that we have all these drugs that have been shown to work, which should cancel the emergency use authorization, right? So none of these things have been happening. So what I predict is about to happen, and other people are seeing the writing on the wall for this as well, because Fauci is actually alluding to the fact that he expects this to happen within a few weeks, is the FDA is going to give full approval to these currently emergency use authorized vaccine products. Full approval is really concerning because once they do that, they're going to have more power to mandate and force these things on people who don't want them. And remember, they don't work because the protein has changed shape. So when you get the whole virus, like you get infected with the whole virus, you make antibodies to the protein and the envelope and the nucleus or the nucleoid membrane, blah, 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 virus stuff, right? But you make antibodies to all the different pieces of the puzzle. But when you are given that shot, you only make antibodies against that specific protein. And that protein, let's say it used to be a blonde and now it's a redhead. And when your immune system is walking around, it's looking for a blonde, trying to find like, how do I get rid of this thing? And there's no blonde there. It's all redhead now. So it's crazy because they're literally going to give full approval, which is absurd because it normally takes like 7 to 10 to 12 years for vaccines to get through this, because they have to do long-term safety studies. We have to evaluate and monitor the people for years who have received this product to see what kind of potential adverse events would they have. But that's not happening, and they're going to give full approval that will require people to get this under new circumstances that we're not facing, or we haven't faced yet. So what was supposed to happen is they were supposed to look at drugs that we already had available, and lo and behold, if they found some, which people did, they're supposed to cancel the emergency use authorization and send those things back to the drawing board so that they go through the full approval process. That did not happen. What is about to happen is the FDA is about to give full approval, cancel the emergency use authorization, full ticket for these really experimental, dangerous, and now obsolete and useless drugs that actually have a lot of downside to them. You're not going to see that in the mainstream media, but the people who are looking for the information are finding it. So land of the free. Peace out, peeps.